Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I will be kayak fishing for multi-species on beautiful Lake Berryessa. It is spring now, so on the kayak, I will be utilizing a float and fly. A float and fly is probably my favorite rig to fish on a paddle style kayak, especially because I am lazy while paddling. I can use the paddling to my advantage. Now as for the gear and tackle, I prefer a much shorter spinning style rod, an ultralight rod, a 6'6" to 1000 size reel loaded with 4-pound monofilament. But the trick is to tie two overhand loop knot, one from the leader, and attach it to the main line with another overhand loop knot. My bait of choice is a 2.5 Kitech paired onto a 1/4 ounce Euro tackle tungsten jig. The reason I like a tungsten jig over a lead jig is because it will descend quite nicely, unlike a lead jig which won't descend as nicely. The goal is to let the jig pendulum the bait into the water column because we will be suspending it. And to rig this bait, just make sure that it is paired straight about a quarter of the way along the bait. Now as for the float, you can fish any float you like, but I'm lazy, so I'm just using a clip-on float onto my main line. Some anglers will prefer a slip style float, but I prefer to do the minimal amount of rigging when I'm kayak fishing. Then I'll apply just a little bit of smelly jelly, the shad flavor, onto the bait. This will give it a little bit of extra attractant. Now as for why I'm on a watercraft today, a kayak, well, as this channel grows, there are quite a handful of guys who do possess these smaller kind of watercraft, whether it be kayaks, canoes, inflatables, or small aluminum boats. A lot of them are curious to how to catch more fish from these smaller underpowered watercraft. Now if you're one of those guys with those $50,000 boats, then this video might not apply as much to you guys. However, this technique is great, especially for these small watercraft. I ended up getting bit, and as demonstrated, this technique, I call it the do nothing technique or the dummy technique. All the angler have to do is just shake the rod tip, and sometimes even while moving along in a small watercraft, the rig can get bit. This is a ditch pickle, a largemouth bass, but there are plenty of these fishes around this time of year, and this rig can catch almost anything, especially from a smaller watercraft as you are moving. Now as for how do I like to fish this technique, depending on how clear the water is, if the water is clear, I will give the float a little bit of a shake every here and now, but if the water is dingy or dirty, I will shake it a lot less and just suspend the bait as the kayak moves along. This is a very healthy largemouth bass, and just like that, the fish is caught on top of the jaw. I'll show them to you guys real quick, and then I'll prep them for release. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. Now as for the reason why I don't tend to fish from a watercraft a lot on this channel is because the older I get, the less of a hassle I want my fishing day to be. I don't like to pack it up and put it away at the end of the day. I ended up getting bit again, and as demonstrated, this technique will catch a lot of fishes, especially because I am fishing around these flooded timber this time of year and I'm paddling. This technique, I can literally just suspend myself and just shake the bopper every here and there, letting the bait undulate a little and letting the craft do the work of pulling the rig along. This is another nice little healthy largemouth bass, and I'll land him and I'll show him to you guys real quick. It's not big by any metric or standard, but very fun to play on ultralight tackle. This is my favorite kind of fishing to do, especially from a kayak. Thanks for playing, buddy. Off you go. One of the biggest advantage to this technique is often its suspension of the bait right above target structure. More times than not, when I'm just floating around, the bait will undulate itself based on the wind and the movement of the watercraft. I ended up getting bit again because the kayak ended up swaying right due to the wind. This is one of the biggest advantages of fishing a float and fly on these kind of smaller underpowered craft. In the south, a similar technique called the spider rig is often deployed to fish for crappie, but here on the west coast, we often call it a float and fly because the bass guys use it specifically to target bass off deep bluffs to quite a great success, especially on lakes like Shasta and some of those down in Southern California. Somehow the GoPro ended up cutting off, and this is a smallmouth bass that I ended up landing. The bait is right there in the corner of the mouth. I literally call this the do nothing bait. This is a gorgeous smallmouth bass, and again, I don't know why, the camera ended up shutting itself off. Now as for where do I like to fish this rig, I like to fish this rig near and around structure and in these shallow back bays. What I'll do is sometimes I'll just give it a little twitch here and there near structure, and just like that I ended up getting bit again. More times than not, if I were to cast this rig out and let it hit the water and don't get bit on the descent as the jig pendulum, I will just give it a little bit of a shake to see if anything is interested. This rig had caught me a plethora of species. I've caught everything from sunfish, black bass, stripers, and even cold water species with this rig. However, I like to use it a lot on a kayak because if I'm on a paddle style kayak, I can literally just paddle this around and give the rod a twitch here and there and end up catching fishes. This is another ditch pickle, very healthy nonetheless. These largemouth bass are so pretty this time of year. They are vibrant and full of color, especially in the spring. Thanks for playing, dude. Rest up a bit and off you go. So some folks might be wondering how long should the leader be when doing this style of fishing. Well, it will be quite a bit of a guess because on a smaller watercraft like this without any electronic, what I'll do is I'll start somewhere around 3 feet and then I'll gradually extend the leader, give or take, on how deep I think the water is. For today, I have the bobber clipped roughly at about 4.5 feet because I'm fishing some deeper water with the tree lines poking up quite high. I am targeting the top of the tree line versus the bottom base of the tree. We are in the midst of spring, so therefore I know that there will always be a handful of fishes sunbathing on top of these timber lines. I ended up getting bit, and this was no black bass. Instead, I knew that this was a crappie. I will be retaining this crappie because I'm in the mood for some fried fish tonight. I really love to eat crappie, especially early in the season. I find that earlier in the season, the crappies will have less of a distinct gamey smell versus later in the season. So when the water is still cold like this early in the spring, I will retain a handful for the frying pan. But later in the season, I won't have as much. Now, why haven't I produced a crappie episode for this channel? Well, I will explain that later on if I ever happen to do so, because this crappie fishing community, or as I call it, the sunfish community, has quite a handful of problems that I don't want to address on this channel or touch. So again, as demonstrated today, this rig is a great rig to fish on the smaller watercraft. You don't need a fish finder, you don't need anything expensive, all you need is a jig and a soft plastic swim bait of your choice with whatever float you prefer. I ended up getting bit again because I ended up turning the kayak, thus moving the bobber, causing a fish to strike the jig as it was suspended above this tree. So whether you're a new angler or a seasoned angler, give this rig a try, especially if you're on these smaller watercraft. Today I'm on a paddle style kayak just for demonstration purposes, that you don't need anything expensive. Again, just make sure that the conditions are safe for your watercraft, whether you're fishing on a lake, pond, or river system. This rig will indeed catch fish. I've caught quite a handful of fishes with this rig, especially from these paddle style craft that aren't exactly hands-free. This is another very nice largemouth bass, and I'll show them to you guys real quick. This minimal style of fishing with no electronic and minimal tackle is still probably among one of my favorite ways to fish. This is a very gorgeous largemouth bass, healthy, bright, and full of colors. Thanks for playing, buddy. Rest up a bit and off you go. The sun is setting fast, so I will see if I can catch one more fish before making the paddle back to the bank. Again, the reason I don't like to fish from a watercraft as much on this channel is because the older I get, I just want my fishing day to be as hassle-free as possible. I don't want to deal with launching the craft, I don't want to deal with cleanup afterward, and I don't want to deal with packing it up and putting it away later. Hence why I tend to fish from the bank a lot. I did end up getting bit again, and this wasn't a big bass by any means, so the next time you guys are out on the water and are in one of these smaller craft, just give this rig a try. I've caught everything on it, whether it be cold water species or warm water species. This rig is especially very friendly for newbies as well. Again, this is another very nice healthy largemouth bass. Thanks for playing, buddy. I'll let you off now. Overall, it was just a great day out on Lake Berryessa. I had a bit of a paddle today and a workout, but it was okay. I caught quite a handful of fishes and a nice crappie for the frying pan. Spring is rolling along here nicely in Northern California. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.